Hi everyone, welcome to NQAPIA's Between Queerness and Diaspora Live. We're going to start in a little bit. I'm just going to start inviting our guests and then we can get started.
How are things up in New York?
Can't complain. The weather's great. My allergies are going wild, but I'm well medicated at the moment.
Hi, beautiful people. It's good to see you. It's nice to see you and meet you, Ben.
Nice to meet you as well.
Hey. Hi, Frederick. So good to see you. That red lip is everything.
Thank
Hi.
you. I love a red lip. Oh, it looks like Leanne is having a little trouble. Um, how are things with you, Angela?
Uh, I'm happy that I'm here with beautiful people. It's a surreal time, I'm not gonna lie. Despite dystopia, I'm very excited to be here in community. So, yes. All in all, my personal immediate access needs are met. Yeah.
Great. Well, while we figure out the Instagram questions, I'll just go ahead and start with the first question for each of you to answer. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit of your journey, both in terms of our shared queerness and our shared Vietnamese identity?
Do you want to go first, Angela?
Sure. Wait, can you say that one more time?
Sure. If you'll just introduce yourself and then share a bit of your journey, both the queer journey and then the Vietnamese journey.
Thank you so much. Sorry, end of the day is like a little bit of a executive functioning delay. Hi y'all, I'm Angela, use she pronouns, Deputy Director at Emergent Fund, currently based on Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York, but originally I'm from North Carolina, very proudly. Yeah, I think in terms of queerness and Viet identity, I definitely identify as like a Viet person from the South, and that's something an identity they bring very much in the room. I carry with me ancestors. Hi, welcome, beautiful face. Hello, it's good to see you again.
Good.
Sorry,
Go on.
mid introduction. We're introducing ourselves, queerness and Viet identity. And yeah, I think they very much go hand in hand. I have a lot of love, and I think if in this moment of rising fascism, if we need to really look to people who've been fighting and winning under conditions of fascism, we really need to be looking to Southern folks, particularly in the South. Southern folks, particularly Black and trans women who've been leading that fight, and a long history of Black and Asian solidarity, particularly within Southeast Asian communities around abolition and anti-deportation work. So there's that. Everyone who's in organizing a movement is overwhelmingly gay. We are all very queer. It's like any movement space that you're in. I'm actually a little worried for the straights because y'all are missing out. Because, if you look at the helm of any frontline movement in this country, it is helmed by queer, Black and brown, immigrant, queer, trans, non-binary, gender marginalized folks. Yeah, so that's me, queerness. I identify as bi, pan, but very like fluid there. I'm also an aspiring drag king, and I can talk about that a little bit more. Mostly gender identity is that I'm a dragon, Virgo, with tropical elements. And I'll
Love.
pass it to whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I can go next. Nice to be in a panel with so many Southerners. Bin Lee, he, him pronouns. Was born and raised in Virginia. Though it's like Northern Virginia, so it like sometimes doesn't quite count. The DC suburbs. I identify as a gay man, work in affordable housing development, studied urban planning. But on the side, like you mentioned, like the queer community. I think we'll talk about this later, but the queer Vietnamese community that I've found came through the organizing work that I've done in Virginia, and we're definitely sticking our necks out there. But I think it's because we don't have the choice of comfort, right? And so, yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
And then welcome, Leanne. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we're just on the first question. Can you introduce yourself and then share a little bit about your journey, both in terms of queerness and Vietnamese identity.
Yeah, sorry for the delay. This is my first IG live, so wait, what's supposed to happen? So I'm glad I'm here and queer and all of that stuff. But my name is Quinn, they pronouns. I'm with Viet Rainbow Orange County. That's always a thing I have to say. And I am not part of the southern region, but I'm from SoCal, and so sort of a South kind of thing. It's embarrassing. I'm not there. But I identify as a second generation genderqueer femme. I was born in the US. I'm once again just a SoCal girly. Southern California is all I know. And I just other fun things is I'm a middle child of five. Shout out to the middle childs out there. Raised Catholic. I have some dogs, so they might need, I mean, you can see their pictures, but barking, so I'll do my best. And I think Andrea said some signs. So like I'm a Libra sun, Sagittarius rising, Pisces. You know how that goes. And I think regarding for like my queer and Viet identity. So I lived and moved around a lot in Little Saigon, and also where my ended up was kind of more on the peripheries of Little Saigon, like on the outside, just outside, right? And so I feel like that's pretty describing both my queer and Viet identity, kind of periphery looking in to something I'm supposed to belong to, right? So like the Viet side, people growing up told me like, oh wait, no, you're Chinese because you celebrate Chinese New Year. And then as a gullible person, like, oh my gosh, I think you're right. But I've had people say like, you don't look full Viet, you must be like French too. And I was like, oh my God, you're right, because I'm very gullible. And I think identity is just something pretty difficult when you're a young kid trying to fit in, but also figure out who you are. So on the Viet end, it took a while to really figure it out, right? And then on the queer end, I had to come out to friends multiple times. I don't look, I guess, typically queer. Um, I passed, and I think that's because of safety and of the way I had to live in Orange County. And for that, I kind of internalized it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I be so queer if I can't wear like a snapback, right? And that's ridiculous. But I did say I was so excited when I got my first Doc Martens. I was like, my bye boots are on. But I think like that really is kind of the how I could sum it up. Like I think that there's often a feeling for me to like not enough and like kind of looking in, but I think that's a mindset that definitely is not healthy, but something to work through, right? I think it's that intersectional experience that I'm assuming a lot of the books here have. So that's me.
Beauty. And for everyone joining, I'm Frederick Tran. I am NQAPIA's Communications and Development Manager, and I will be moderating today's panel. So before we move on to our next question, I actually wanted to share a line from a song by the Vietnamese composer Phạm Duy. He wrote this song called Tình Ca, and it's a beautiful song, and I'll just say a couple lines to lead us into our next question. Tôi yêu tiếng nước tôi từ khi mới ra đời người ơi. Mẹ hiền ru những câu xa vời. À ơi tiếng ru muôn đời. And I think that's really relevant to where our family stories begin, right? So like, I'm not talking about the, very well known, we're the descendant of dragons and fairies, right? Laklam Kwan Oka. We all know that. I want to know more about where your, immediate family stories begin, and how has that legacy shaped how you moved through the world we live in now?
I feel like, sorry, I'll take a stab at it first. Being a child of immigrants, was born in this country, right? It's like, I feel like our story, my story has like different chapters, right? I feel like I'm inheriting, this Vietnamese story, and the Vietnamese face. But then, these multiple identities that we carry, right? Like being American as well, and as Wayne mentioned, like, for so long, like you never quite feel like you're enough of anything, right? Navigating these different identities. And so, but now it's like, I'm getting to the point where I feel like I'm just enough of it. But yeah, and maybe this is an interesting piece about the Vietnamese community that maybe we can, if we have time. You know, my parents did not leave Vietnam in 75. They left in, my dad was a boat refugee in 1980. And then my mother raised my three older brothers until 1990. And so living under, you know, as enemies of the state for decades, right? And so it definitely informs my views today. I think my critical thinking as well with regards to touchy political subjects in this country or in our Vietnamese community.
I can go next, and actually sharing sort of the origin story of your family, because I do think that, like, depending on your family's positionality, even though many of our families may have, depending on their positionality, lost everything when they came here. You know, some families remember wealth, right, when they were part of like the land owning class in Vietnam. Some folks were poor. My family bridged a little bit of both. My dad's side was very much a poor family from the country. My mom's side was a little bit wealthier, and then they lost everything, and that shapes their politics, right? My aunt would say this a lot. Most of my family is actually in Houston, Texas. Also, when you were playing the song, I was like, okay, this is like, you grew up going to like Viet school after church or after temple. So shout out to all the kids, you know, really good Viet. My Viet is not that good. But I do think that some of those class biases or aspirations do carry over. And I'll name for me, particularly in like the Southern experience, I actually was baptized in, sorry, this is so Southern the way I'm starting out. I was baptized in Biloxi, Mississippi, and through Catholic resettlement. And my family were shrimpers, boat people. I remember my grandma was saying, oh, you know, nhớ Mississippi Delta is the y chang giống Việt Nam, you know, like always remembering like the humidity, the jungle, and like really felt it was like same, like literally Mekong to the Mississippi. And, you know, my family were displaced to Texas because of KKK presence, right? And so a lot of the Viet fisher folk were competing with KKK members, and so experienced a lot of hate crime and violence. And so that displaced a lot of family to the liberal haven that is now known as Texas. And so I do think that's why, like, at heart, I've seen, even though my own family's politics are very complicated around like white aspirations and MAGA and all of that, I know at heart, like, Black solidarity and collective liberation, our solidarity is bound together, and that literally is like my origin story. And so I give everything like to the Black women organizers who raised me in all the spaces, who did not take in, like, a lot of traditional Asian spaces did not accept Southeast Asians, and a lot of like the OG Southeast Asian orgs are specifically led and helmed by Black women and Southeast Asian women. When we're looking at Freedom Inc., when we're looking at SEAC Village in North Carolina. So just naming the roots of organizing within the Vietnamese community explicitly as having ties within the Black community as a counter narrative to what's assumed to be default anti-Blackness within the umbrella of Asian organizing.
But love learning. I'm just like, oh, I wish I could be in person. But anyway, that's not even a question. But I really appreciate this question about family, because I feel like I am still figuring it out. There's a lot of that traumatic like silences that we don't really tell each other about the history. So as much as I'm trying to figure myself out, I'm also trying to figure them out. And so the pieces that I do know is that also a Viet Catholic, both sides of my family were Catholics from the north, and so with that they moved to the south around like 1954, around that time and era. And both my family side were in politics, and so I think my own white, he ran for like local official, and his slogan was like to cut out the corruption in government. And so I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. And so both my grandparents on the high end ranking men. They're both imprisoned in the labor camp. So they didn't move over with the rest of the folks. They kind of went with the military 1990s. And so my family in 1992, and I'm actually the first in my whole extended family to be born in the US. And I am actually named after the uncle that sponsored my family over. And so I think there's like some sort of poetic tie that how it emerges in kind of like my own life, right? I think like my mom was the eldest daughter of like 8, and my dad was the oldest side, so he got that fun kind of thing. And so there's a lot of responsibility towards kin that I carry into the things that I do. And my family, I think just like by the nature of the way you have to maneuver and survive, they have that hustle mentality. They see an opportunity and they're like, I'm gonna make it work and like flourish for me. I have the same way in community work, I think, not so as entrepreneurial, but I think I do it creatively in the organizing that we do. And I think like beyond all, so it's it's different and also different and same. I think like from my family, I found like a lineage of like unfounded determination for the pursuit of justice and fairness. And I'm like, wow, okay, I am my grandfather's daughter. I am my mother's daughter. And so I think that as much as I'm getting to know, not all rosy and great, but I think like those pieces, they emerge when I it and when I think about just how I about my day.
Beautiful. We share a lot of things in common. My grandparents also fled from North Vietnam to South Vietnam in 1954, kind of in the first diaspora of running away from communism, right? And it's just so interesting because my grandparents were Buddhist. So they were literally running away from the commies, not because of religious persecution. Um, and now that we see the rise of fascism, I'm like, oh, is this a storyline that's going to repeat in my lifetime? I don't want to do that, but we'll see how this world moves, right? Um, and Ben, I know you said your dad came here was a boat refugee, right? My mom is what I call a failed boat refugee. So she spent, I think, and her siblings spent all of the family wealth trying to escape by boat. I think she tried 25 times. Some one time landed her in the hospital with malaria, one time landed her, or not one time, multiple times in labor camps, um, or I guess they call them re-education camps. Um, she's great at peeling shrimp now. So, that is one thing she learned from the camps, but did not pass on to me. Um, but it really, for me, has also shaped how I move through this world, right? Because everything I do, I look at my mother was willing to die to get to this country. So, like, I'm going to take care of and take all the opportunities afforded to me because if not, then what was it all for, right? And I think that's something that we all do in our own movement work is that what are we all fighting for is the better life that our ancestors just dreamed of, right? So, um, in terms of our queerness, um, I kind of want to ask, how has your family responded to queerness? I know, Ian, you kind of said that you're still figuring that out. Um, has it changed at all since you first started to now?
Uh, I, I think I guess I'll go whip around the other way, and I can take that question. Uh, so how my family responded. I think, well, like the experience for folks like your siblings, cousins, whatever. They're like, okay, like it's not a problem. So that was really kind of the first family that kind of accepted me was a lot of my all of my siblings. I came out in the worst possible time in my family's history, around 2020 when my family was also dealing with other issues around substance and just things. And so I had not come out for a really long time because I was like, well, it's safe. So I'm just gonna I can hide my whole life, right? It's chill. I can just turn it on and turn it off, right? And I got the job for V-Rock, and I was like, oh crap, I think I actually have to come out. But that wasn't only the case, right? Because I was in a found community and felt like I actually could come out, and then I decided to come at the worst possible time. My extended family on my mom's side actually rejected me because of Catholicism, and they cannot understand how I can be both queer and Catholic when I understand that very well. And so they kicked me out. My mom had a journey to figuring it out, and it is, I think, as best as it can be because she's very spiritual and Catholic. So we had actually a conversation because I got engaged. And so, yeah, I know. And so we had a phone call, and my mom was like, growing up, I never had this experience. People weren't out, people are just people, and I'm glad that you want to share this with me. But she put on her own boundary. She's like, I can't accept it because I love God. And I was like, you know what? This is a fair conversation. I am glad we're talking to each other as opposed to like just a one-sided conversation. So my mom doesn't accept me or my friendship with my friend. But my father accepts me. So I think it is a growing process for them just as much as it was for me. And so I'm just kind of focused on me and allowing them to see how and see what's going on in my brain and how I've been just going about my life. So it's a journey, but right now it's okay.
Um, I can go next. I think for me it was more that I mean I'm the eldest immigrant. I'm the eldest refugee daughter, and I think because of that, I paved my own path in so many ways since I was very young. And so I know like in a meditation practice, sometimes they do that, like return to your breath in Vietnamese. Like when I was at a practice, they were like the like về nhà, like come home to yourself. And so I do feel like queer, it was there's no like coming out for me. It just was it is what it is. Like I'm gay, y'all. Like I'm queer. I've always been sort of that character, someone who was like positioned as like a dragon who showed up with like a lot of both mass and femme energy, but also like even from a very young age, I was always pushing back on the men in the family and like while the women would, sort of go away to the kitchen and the men were arguing, I would get in there. So I think that even without being queer, I was showing up in a way that subverted a lot of gender binaries within the household. But yeah, I think it was like very smooth for me, where I just was basically like on the phone with my partner, who's very non-binary, and just like it was like, hey, everyone, this is them. Like, go talk to them, say hi. And I think they sort of slid it in. I also was raised very conservative Catholic, and I think there's a little bit of like maybe the intersection of Southern plus Southern Vietnamese plus like Catholic, where you have like that polite, soft, let's be nice, but like not really tell the truth, like type thing. So there's a little bit of like love the person, hate the sinner. So like they'll be like nice to you if you're gay, like, oh, I don't mind the gays, but they'll like absolutely like try to legislate you out of like existence and like have to see no contradiction in that. And so I think I've really had to like have some conversations with my family around that to the best can. Some of them were fruitful conversations, some of them were shouting matches. And at the end of the day, I think like because of some of the muscles around being eldest Viet daughter and just sort of having to YOLO a lot of life. I just didn't care. I was just like, okay, like I don't really need your acceptance. Like it is what it is. And I do think like one thing that makes me proud sometimes when I feel a lot of grief around family and there are other tensions, mostly around politics in my work and orientation in the space. Um, a lot of my baby cousins who are not babies, they're like fully in their 20s. I'm Asian, don't raise it. I'm older than I look. But a lot of them have secretly said to me, like, Angela, like, we see you being out there. I'm a little bit like luxury auntie, like gay auntie. Like, I get to like show it, be fabulous, fuck up shit, and say the things that need to say be said, like unapologetically. And I think that that has given them space also to come to terms. I have converted some of my cousins like fully on the gay agenda, and that gives me a lot of pride. So I just want to say, like, your queerness sometimes when the type of love of self and love of others can shine. This is Tich Nhat Hanh, where it shines so much that it engenders that same love within others. And so I think we can model that through just existing and being open and unapologetically queer.
Love it, Angela. By the way, on the Frederick, what you were saying earlier about like failed attempts at escaping, I'm not sure if I've looked it up before, but my parents always measure things in how many bars of gold it costs. And I have yet to translate that to like a dollar amount, like how many bars of gold they had to spend each attempt at fleeing Vietnam. But yeah, so definitely relate there. But one of these days we should calculate that. These stories should be told. Like it's like way more dramatic than some of these movies out there. Um, yeah, on family, I think I'm fortunate. come from a family of like very strong women that are that have been open-minded. You know, they're you know, educated in Vietnam, and so that probably helps. My dad doesn't speak a lot, so I can't tell what he's thinking. And so you know, he's cool now. But I remember I lived at home in college, and I had a guy over, and I didn't lock the door, so I didn't know my dad walked in my room while we were sleeping. The next day, he asked me, why is there a guy in your bed? I was like, Dad, seriously? Like, and at this point, I had already been outed by an ex. Yeah. So, but I'm fortunate that that my parents have always been supportive, whether they can, like, whether we can talk about it or not. So, you know, I think that's where, you know, that American part of my identity comes in, that need to like talk about it, right? And you know, not just be okay living next to each other, right? And I think that's really built a really strong relationship for me with my mom and you know, my dad to an extent. Like he's chill now. I've been out for a while now, but you know, being able to talk about it, because I remember like my mom is, you know, she's been involved with like PFLAG a little bit here and there. She's very much a social butterfly. She loves the attention. Um, uh, but when she was on an interview and someone asked her, you know, about like, you know, her experience or like her, you know, gay people in her life, she didn't talk about me, right? Her experience with me. She talked about other people, right? Because she was a high school teacher in Vietnam, and she went to an all-girls school, so she has lots of stories of, you know, being around queer people. One of her high school teachers transitioned actually when they came to the U.S. So when they landed at the airport, they registered as male and started their transition process. But yeah, it's so fascinating that, like, you know, even though as accepting she is of me, like she can't talk about it and vocalize it, right? And so, you know, it's a journey for everyone.
Yeah. It's first of all, we got to give it up for our Viet moms out there who are doing the PFLAG stuff. Thank you for being a beacon of hope for your kids. Um, and then you'll laugh at this. I think you'll all laugh at this. So when I married my husband last year, one of the gifts my mom gave me was a bar of gold. And I was like, wow, talk about inherited trauma. Like you literally manifested it and gave it to me. Um, but it was just, you know, I think it was very Vietnamese. Instead of like Benji, she gave me a bar of gold. Um, but yeah, for me, coming out was a little different. My first job out of college, I was doing a lot of travel back and forth for Vietnam, working for an NGO. And there was something about the way my family I was staying with and my mom at the same time were talking to me about, I don't understand why you go back to Vietnam so often and don't have a girlfriend. And I don't know if it was a mixture of that and the humidity and the heat. I had like a full-on mentee. I just started crying and I texted my mom and I was like, y'all gotta stop because I'm like gay with a capital G. Um, that's not gonna work for me. Um, it took her a couple weeks, and then how I knew she came around to the whole idea and like fully grasped it was she was just like, you know, my friends in Vietnam have a lot of single sons. And I was like, oh, that's a different issue to tackle on a different day. But you know, I felt, you know, that it took her a little bit, but she wrapped her mind around it and she fully went, still my kid. And he's still single in my head. So I got to fix that. Um, but thank you all for sharing. Are there aspects of Vietnamese culture or tradition or spirituality that may have helped you make sense or maybe not made sense about your queer identity?
I do think like going back to like decolonial like aspects, like the story of like Habat Jung,
Yeah.
which are the three Viet women sisters who overthrew our colonizers, literally with tits out, naked on like elephants. I mean, can't get any gayer than that. It's pretty fabulous. We're literally the children of dragons and fairies. I mean, there's something that I was thinking about, like the deep culture of matriarchy, which I think also has a complex relationship because you layer on top of that the patriarchy that was introduced through Confucianism, and also through Catholicism, right? And so there's been some subversion of those dynamics that I really long for and miss and want to reconnect with that original Viet matriarchy. I wasn't raised Buddhist, but I used to live in Dorchester, which is another OG Viet community in the heart of Boston. I was a public school teacher there, and there's a temple, the Viet temple there had, let me know if I mispronounce this because I wasn't raised in the tradition, but Kwanam, who's the goddess of mercy and compassion, who is a trans woman. And so literally like someone who is revered as a core deity to our faith, someone, and I think that for many people, the reason why a lot of Catholics love Nukmea, like Mother Mary, is because I think they see them as parallel, like different facets of the same person, right? This like idea of sacred matriarchy. And so that's something that I really hold on to, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic at all.
I can take a gander at this. And it's not a fully fleshed out thought here at all. But something about the Viet culture, me and my partner went back to Vietnam for the first time, both of us, 2, 3 years ago at this time. I can't really remember, but we had just like a homecoming shock, but also like comfy familiarity. And I'm just gonna say, because I can, Viet people are we're like so rude, right? Rude when we meet people. We call each other like crap nicknames and like we teasing and everything. But I think it makes sense for my queer identity because it's also like we can joke and make fun of each other and like just be so rude and all of that stuff, but we still super on the Viet side, super care and are curious and want to like take care of you. Like even if we just like made fun of I just got body, but you're feeding me now. So it's kind of, oh, both can exist. And so definitely I think it helps me make sense of my that kind of like both and if the Viet culture and the silliness and also the lighthearted also can get really deeply connected. I feel like it makes sense of my queer identity because I feel like for the longest time I just grew up beating myself up, being like, oh gosh, you're not queer enough. You don't even listen to all of Tegan and Sarah, or whatever, right? Like, okay, yeah, but also like, okay, yeah, whatever, like I could have both of these things, they could be fine. But I feel like there's some sort of connection and kinship with how just like Viet people just joke and are loud and take up space, but are like really connected to building in a way and just like gossiping and all of that. And so I feel like there's so many through lines that just for me being queer and Viet don't like clash. They like just make sense together because there's a lot of similarities. And so I think that um I don't know if it's on nod, so I think people resonate with it, but was not a fully fleshed out thought. I was like, oh, our people are so rude, but in a good way. We'll call you out, and it'll be spicy, and also an open, a deeper conversation if it needs to be.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because it's like I didn't grow up in a particularly religious family. I mean, we're Buddhists, right? But Buddhism is like take what you want and whatever. Um, and then Vietnamese culture, I don't think like we are necessarily like explicitly homophobic, right? Or like, but it's like, oh, like people don't know how to navigate and talk about it. They don't talk about it, right? Like, who's the famous singer with a mustache and lipstick and a mullet, and long hair?
He sings,
Suena.
Tung
yeah,
An, yeah, right?
I'm La Lam is the song that he's well known for. Yeah.
Right. Like we have like these queer people just like in our everyday life and popular culture, right? But we just like, yeah, it's such a weird dynamic. Um, yeah, I don't know. But I think it helps. It helps existing, that, like, it's not explicitly something that we're like, men have to be a certain way. I guess there is a little bit of that. But I'm also fortunate that I have a bunch, like, I don't know, queer runs in my family, and so that has helped me a little bit exist in my family. I have a gay uncle, I have a bunch of gay cousins, and then the next generation is also very queer, and so yeah.
We love that the next generation is very, very queer, because to me that's hopeful. Um, Buddhism in the South is a little different. Um, I think Southern Vietnamese people who moved to the South have kind of embraced the conservative culture, right? So, like, Buddhism is supposed to be about ending suffering for all beings, right? You're not supposed to be creating more suffering for other people. Um, at my temple, I'll talk about abortion, for example. That was a topic in one of our Dharma classes, and one of the elder youth leaders turned it into, well, abortion's wrong because it causes suffering for the baby. Um, and I was like, wow, auntie, auntie, that Southern really jumped out of you. And I'm not talking about Vietnam. Like, that Southern pride really jumped out. And I was like, I don't think Buddha ever said that, um, ever. And she was just like, but it's in his teachings. And I was just like, where? Um, so for me, growing up Buddhist was a very different experience than what one would think when they think of Buddhism. They think it's like, everyone's accepting, and that wasn't quite the case where I grew up. Um, one of the one of the first people that ever modeled like positive queer life, um, was an older sister at my temple. She was the first transgender person I've ever met. Um, and she's doing incredible things now. I'll name her Mulan Alexander. She was the first Vietnamese American drag queen to perform at Reunification Palace a couple years ago. Um, so, you know, even though it was very, very difficult for us to grow up in this setting, I think we flourished. So there's hope for the future. Um,
Frederick,
mhm.
if I can jump in,
Yeah.
I think, like, I guess you caveat that, like, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable if my mother and family, like, went to temples and monasteries with, like, as a Thai Dojai, right, at the head of a monastery, because I think for a long time, like, we've been going to Stuving,
Hmm.
led by a Suko, right, and
Hmm.
a sister, and I think that's um, also been a much safer environment for me, um, as opposed to a more traditional Buddhist setting. But yeah.
Period. But also, like, Sukul should be the tradition. Um, because the vibes there are like very, very cool. Very good. Um, now that since we are talking because we are, I guess, commemorating 50 years since the fall of Saigon, um, how has that history shown up in your life, if at all? And beyond the flags being flown at January 6th, I want to cover that as a separate tidbit. But beyond that,
This is actually something that I think about a lot. I'm actually estranged from my family, and this year was a really hard year. I think, especially around we both had the recent death of my grandmother on my mother's side, who's like the core matriarch of our family, and in general, like around folks who literally carried a lot of those memories of the experience of our forced displacement following like the U.S. war in Vietnam. And also like just like the politics and just being around uncles for that long and just seeing a lot of like the bullshit and the patriarchy. I do think that like, and this is where I am at in my journey, is like I have seen, as someone who's done political work for a really long time, the way how red baiting and the weaponization of the use of the word communism and what it gets conflated with and what it's not. I remember even as a kid, I would ask like my, you know, I have a lot of uncles who always are like ranting and about like communist this and communist that. But when I ask them like, so in your mind, what is a democracy? And they would literally say, I remember my dad saying, like, yeah, well, a good democracy is when you have a strong man who can take charge and make strong decisions. Because what they're really talking about is patriarchy. And so I don't think that you can have political change without cultural change. I also think that with any political experiments from democracy all the way through like socialism, yes, I said the S word, I do think that if you don't address the underlying inequities, like you're never going to accomplish a vision of justice or, you know, freedom or whatever that is. I think in many ways connecting like the common, like a lot of people are like, we would never want to see, you know, communism equals fascism. A lot of those things, the most verdant anti-communists absolutely ushered in this current vision of Trump MAGA. That is their vision of the world, and especially folks who do buy into patriarchal dominance, and that is their vision of a fair and equal world, who do buy into like white aspirations, who do buy into capitalism, even though most of my family are working poor and very much suffer from capitalism. I do think like both the pain of people never, like the Vietnamese experience has never been really validated. Like a lot of the movies we see out there, with the exception of like The Sympathizer or, you know, others are almost always from like, even like, you know, Queer's Love, like The Body Keeps the Score. That book is terrible. Like literally the trauma that they're talking about is how sad that these, you know, white soldiers like raped Vietnamese women and feel bad about it and they have to live with that. My God, the PSTD from raping Viet women. Like we don't really talk about gendered violence in the Vietnam War. And that's something that has continued. And I think that like there's this scene, sorry, this is a bourbon conversation, like maybe one late night when we're together, we can go like deep into this. But you know, like there was a scene in The Sympathizer when one man was like, I feel so disenfranchised, I feel invisible and seen, so I can't beat like my oppressors, I can't beat my boss, so I'll go home and I'll beat my family. And so as someone who a lot of my politics has been radicalized around patriarchy and what it would take to actually empower healthy families and to heal from intergenerational trauma and to get at the root cause of that. I do link that back all the way back to like colonialism, many iterations of colonialism. And then I also find hope in that we have overcome many of our colonizers and survived despite that. And there are also a lot of contradictions. I'll like my last soapbox, I promise. But even within my own family, my grandfather on my mother's side, there are two brothers, one of whom like escaped and came to the U.S. and lost everything and was the shrimper that I was talking about, was displaced by the KKK. The other brother was very much wanting to free Vietnam from the French colonizers and actually was in the prisons at Con Dao, like which were known for being the most horrific prison by the French. And was part of that freedom resistance movement. And so they were sort of on the opposite ends. And at the same time, you know, even though my family is very anti-communist, anytime we go home to Vietnam, it's like, ooh, you know, call out to that family because some ngong them, like you want to hang out with them, like they're the good people you want to be with. So even despite the politics, they can hold that contradiction. And so I do think like being queer is innately subverting binaries, and that is a binary, including the binary around like communism equals bad and da 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 da. There's a lot more nuance within that. And so I do try to disrupt and intervene in that way, especially when it opens up the door. The weaponization of communism opens up the door to extreme harm and violence, both at an interpersonal level and on a systemic level.
Gee, Angela, thanks for dropping those bars. Owen, what about you?
Yeah. So definitely in Little Saigon here. I'm in Westminster. I live there with my partner, and there's a lot of hubbub right around this time. And so it's a constant reminder of like just kind of like how community moves and like how history just shows up and is persistent. And there's a lot of things that I can share about, like I guess like narrative making and all that stuff. But I love talking about my family and myself instead. And so I can definitely share how this history kind of just bubbles up in my own family, and just kind of like just observations as of late, because I guess I'm using this time to vet and process. But for sure, trauma shows up in all the ways. And I think like just kind of being able to piece back like that organizer lineage. I'm so glad I'm also with other folks, because I was like, my family came over on the plane, but also they tried on a boat. Does that make it different? um, but so my dad had organized a lot of like boat escapes back in the day. So he was an organizer. I was like, okay, Dad, and definitely did not go through a couple times. And the one time that he, when I remember what I was told, that the one time he had a successful organized kind of boat ride out, was he actually stayed behind to be with my mother. And so I think it's kind of like we care for community in different ways, and when folks go through obviously war, it comes up in different creative ways. And so like I think even though my dad's not a quote unquote organizer, he still has community very much in mind, right? He does smog check in Orange County. Business shout out if you need smog check. And he'll help people who can't afford it, and teach them how to take care of the car, right? And being able to take care of that community, so that sense of community is so ingrained because of it was so needed at that time. So it bubbles up in different ways. And then I think that there's an interesting part about community too. So it's a funny story. I'm going to try to make it short. So we have a group of VROC moms. They love putting on musicals. So they had a musical. They're like, oh, we'll invite all of your parents. Just give us your number. We'll invite them. So hey, mom would want to go. She's in the church choir, but she'd want it. I was like, musical. And so my mom ended up beefing with one of the VROC moms, missed, I think just because she was protective of me as her child. And she was like, how is this a VROC mom? How is this your mother? I'm your mother. And so that was kind of the miscommunication on that end. And so she basically she went to the show to start a fight, but she actually ended up just watching it. And so I had to talk to her afterwards because she said some not nice words to the other VROC mom. And so I had a conversation, and that was the first time where I got to share, like, I work for a nonprofit and I do community work. And then so she was sharing, and she got really emotional. She's like, well, why do you want to fight your own people? Why are you fighting? Um, and I was like, well, I'm not like punching grandmas and grandpas. There's like a fear of like going against your own people. I think like there's like the sense of like you make change by becoming wealthy, and then like being like, aha, yay, I la la, whatever, right? You take care of yourself and then you could take care of other people. But I think it was a conversation to be like, well, that there's some people that don't accept who I am and what I do and other things. So I think there was such a fear in the way that I think like even in English we articulate, we're fighting for a cause, or we're struggling. And I think in my mom's eyes, she's like, well, I came all this way. I don't want you to struggle and fight. And so I think that was a moment of like coming, I think like a bubbling, yeah, we're for more of like talking about like, yeah, that, the sense of needing to stay together because that's all we have. But at the same time, like we can also call out people who don't kind of, I don't know, give our humanity back to us. And so it was kind of like just different interesting threads that like I think come up and make me really reflective around this time of year. And along with all the pomp and circumstance that is going around on the streets of Little Saigon. But it's always pretty interesting.
Including someone going around cutting flags apparently in Houston. Yeah, all heard about that. Yeah. Yeah, 50th anniversary. I would say that South Vietnam was never really a democracy, so our people don't really know what democracy is, and so and in that way, I think I give them a bit of grace for not, not or being susceptible to authoritarianism. Uh, so I never shouted out my organization. So this is, I have my day job, and then We're just a grassroots volunteer group, Viet Place Collective in Northern Virginia. And I think place is so important, right? I think like you know, as queer people, like we spend our whole life trying to figure out ourselves and our sense of belonging and where we fit in. And I think it applies to our communities as well. And being in a place where, you know, Vietnamese aren't as big of a population, right? I feel like we're really, you know, it's even more important that we have that place. By the way, I've visited San Jose, visited Orange County during that, which is like, oh my God, like I loved it so much. The festival at Garden Grove, like, oh, like so jealous. I don't have anything like that in the East Coast. And then the San Jose, oh my God, like the smog from the firecrackers the day after that is insane. Even though fireworks are illegal in California, by the way, everyone just turns a blind eye, and it's insane. But you know, we don't have anything like that in Virginia, and so um, I I think for us, like most of us are queer organizers, and like we see how important it is to like um, find that sense of belonging, and we want that for our community. And so when um, you know, like and I think our story was compelling in the organizing we did, because when the community first came, we were, you know, we just bought, you know, rented up some shops that were like depressed because they were building a metro station. And then a metro station opened, gentrification happened, and we were displaced, right? And we moved to where we are today. And now that process is happening all over again, right? And so um, I think like uh, it, like it's a very proud moment that we were able to organize the way we did. This year, we were able to get the street honorary renamed Saigon Boulevard as well, in honor of the 50th anniversary. Um, and you know, it's definitely an homage to an honor, not an homage, and to honor our parents' struggle and their legacy. But also it's like for ourselves, right? Like this, um, like like you can't erase us, right? You can't, um, because that was their intention. um, and um, yeah, I don't know, this is not a very well thought out point.
I
um, Go for it, Angela.
I really appreciate that. Like, I think there's both like I think like what would alleviate some of the pain and the allure of authoritarianism or some of that weaponized messaging is a sense of belonging, right? And a sense of being seen, but like not superficially representation seen, but like deeply seen, for that harm to really be acknowledged, and that has yet to be. And I think community politics around this are also complex, but Southeast Asian folks are still being disappeared in real time. Like the same day that the Atlanta like spa massage massacre happened, the next day, lots of Southeast Asians, mostly Viet folks, were deported, right? And people were not connecting the dots between anti-Asian violence as connecting both of those experiences. I had a chance to be in Cambodia with some Viet, with like a full plane of folks who literally just right after the plane. I don't know if you realize this, when ICE picks you up, they take you. It's not straight, like they pick you up from your home city and then take you to wherever. It's meant to be cruel. They'll take you handcuffed from city to city to city to city and city. So you're on a plane with your hands behind your back for like 5 days. And there's like a Viet man from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I think just like the invisibility of that experience. And for some folks, the war has not ended, right? That there is still that experience that is in real time, very invisibilized. And there's a lot of shame too, right, around whether like one's citizenship. So yeah, I think that harm of being disappeared, of being erased, exists in many ways across many different um, spaces. Yeah.
So I know we're about to hit upon the hour. Are you all okay staying on an extra half hour to finish our conversation? Okay, thank you. Um, So this history is very interesting in my life. I want to say this history is actually the reason why I'm probably doing as much organizing as I am. The first protest I ever went to in my life was a Dam Vĩnh Hưng contest, right? Or concert back when he was like very pro-communism, very pro-Vietnam. All the aunties and uncles were like raging mad, like frothing at the mouth that how dare he come here and perform. So my mom actually took me and my sister, because she was a single mom at the time, to one of his concert venues, and we stood outside with our little signs that said, turn your car around, don't support communism. Um, and my mom was working for the Vietnamese radio station here in Arlington, Texas at the time. Um, and it was interesting because I grew up in the little kitchen behind the radio station where, she would just sit me down and my sister down with a book and some toys, and then she'd go be an anchor on air. Um, Little did I know, 10 years later, I would be the one behind the microphone. Um, I got my first kind of big boy job during college at the Dallas Vietnamese radio station. That's why my Vietnamese is so good. Because there is nothing like using the wrong word with the wrong diacritical mark and having an auntie call in live and tell you said it wrong. And then I'm like, how do you say it? And she goes, figure it out yourself, and hangs up. And I'm like, cool. I'm humiliated. Thank you so much. Um, but um, for me, it has always shown up in the work, in the community. Um, the city of Arlington has a veterans park that the Vietnamese American community really raised money to have a Vietnamese American memorial, where it wasn't just honoring the American soldiers who died, but the soldiers of the South Vietnamese Republic Army that passed or served. And that was a really, really big deal for our community because a lot of those times, in Western media and narratives, the soldiers of South Vietnam are completely ignored. They're only used as a body count or, a strategic number, but never as like, hey, this was the life of, someone who died fighting for their country. Um, so I guess that leads me into our next question about community and movement building. Um, Ben, I'm going to let you go first for this one because you've kind of touched on it with your work with Viet Place Collective. How have you found and built queer Vietnamese community?
I can't say that we really have one in Northern Virginia, and I would say there isn't a particularly robust like community in the area, and I think there's a general generational shift happening as well. Like a lot of the legacy organizations, whether they're like associated with um, the region that they grew up in, or the school that they graduated, or the police association, whatever. Like from and all those folks are getting older, right? And those were the folks that were running a lot of community events and keeping the younger generation out. And so I think this opportunity, I guess we've turned it into an opportunity, right? Like if our potential displacement, like the city was planning to allow for development in the area, and we stepped in and really asked for concrete measures to protect these businesses. Because for us, like the Eden Center, right? It's the only gathering place. Like April 30th, we'll have a flag ceremony in the frickin' parking lot, right? Like I aspire for so much more than our community, but a parking lot is what we have right now. I mean, that's another conversation, but it's also interesting, like these later waves of immigrants, like we've settled in the suburbs as opposed to a city, right? Where the suburbs, the way they're built, they're just very hostile to community building because they're not walkable, very car oriented. If your family is going to grow in socioeconomic status or family wise, like you just have to move further, right? You just move further, right? And so like literally you have to pick up and leave, right? And now my parents are reaching retirement age, and um, uh, like I think about like it's how do they age in place, and they're so far from their community, right? Like they've been able to drive everywhere, but at some point they're not going to drive, and it's going to be very lonely for them. So I'm like, how do we, yeah, but another topic for another time. But through this organizing, like I've found like we're pretty much majority queer um, as a group of organizers, and it's been incredibly rewarding, right? Um, I think like I'm based in New York, and so that's made it really hard because the work we do, like outreach and whatnot, it has to be very like face to face, and so I was racking up a lot of Amtrak points and um, and bus trips, but it like when I did what I was passionate about and for the people that I love, like that's where I found community. And so hopefully we can one day have a V-Rock over here. I saw y'all when I went to Orange County. I saw y'all on the parade, and this was like a couple years ago. So it was like the first time, like one of the first years that you were allowed to be in that parade, and it was very emotional for me. I loved it.
I really love a lot of the work that is specifically like Eden Center in that region, right? In Viet place. Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the connection around the harm of being abandoned after war, right? And then also ongoing like continued organized abandonment from the state, from literally from the moment they arrived to this moment. My family still is abandoned by the state, and they're facing even steeper drop off. So just thinking about like the that pain of what it means to not have the resources that you need to really thrive. And I think that just like as we have blighted communities, we also have blighted political homes. It's something that I think has been intentional. A lot of us were intentionally resettled in very isolated areas, in part to keep us from building the community that could become powerful. And so it's by design. So just reflecting on that, and that's actually a site of grief for me. And so I'm very invested literally through like Emergent Fund and the building of particularly like left or movement, really like deeply principled in solidarity and really working at some of the contradictions. And some of that means also facing like areas where, Viet folks as part of like the American narrative around assimilation have really bought into harmful American narratives. I don't really buy it. I think America is complicated and very violent. So I don't ascribe to all of it, and just like to really sit with it, especially if we want to move towards a place where our communities are actually resourced to have the peace and thriving that they deserve. Yeah.
What about you, Lynn?
Yeah, I have. So, I mean, the short answer is yeah. I have a queer community. It's kind of literally my job. But I think like it was a very interesting journey, right? And so I kind of on the same thing, the vein of like my thing of like, oh, I'm on the peripheries looking in, right? That was the same thing with B-Rock's formation. I wasn't part of B-Rock at the very beginning. I was in college when that parade exclusion happened, where like the Viet Federation in Southern California, who was organizing the parade, was like, LGBTQ people is not part of the Viet culture. Like, y'all can't be part of this parade. And at that time, I was actually in college, and we did culture nights because that's what VSAs and VSUs do. And our culture night actually, we're on the more kind of political end of the this college Viet student grouping, and so our culture night was actually about um, the LGBTQ identities. And so at one point, I'm in this play, and we're exploring just attitudes and a person's narrative through this play. And at the other side, I'm seeing things happen in my hometown. And then once again, also very unique. I was in a documentary making class, and one of my classmates was filming the exclusion. And so I felt like I couldn't escape it, right? In a way that I was just like, you know, this is this is the time when it happened. And so it, got to see VROC grow up from the periphery, then coming in. But I never really thought that I could have a Viet community, a queer Viet community, because it just felt like I wasn't enough in either identities in kind of way. I had my own personal journey that I had to go, and at that time I was living in Los Angeles, and so I would not have been able to come into the queer community that basically VROC, that I love without people inviting me in and kind of doing that loving, encouraging, like, oh, hey, meet this person, drag, 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 kind of vibe, which is very, I think I have it's like reminds me of like when Frederick, you're saying your mom is like, oh, I know this person, you should meet this person. That's very much that kind of what happened in VROC, getting to meet some of the founders, getting to meet like just people. I got really into, there was a thing called household building, basically make more like Viet organizers. And then there was some folks from VROC that were there. So just being able to connect via people and then getting like pulled in and meeting other folks. And so, I cannot be where I am without the queer community because they have basically saved my life. Oh no. And then on the flip end too, just for a fun fact, my partner I found my partner there too. So, oh my gosh, thank you, Vera. But also like I love and building and with this job now, and there's that responsibility and of holding that space for everyone and being not having those toxic organizing or toxic community building practices from either or the places. And so it's great to find it. Sometimes I wish I could be a recipient of it, but I am still a recipient of it because I'm still in the community. But I think it's difficult in the kind of like where I'm at now. It's seeing all the things where the community can be. Sometimes there's days definitely where I wish I was like, I wish I didn't work for an org that had all my identities, Orange County Queer, because it's really rough, especially when we see it, the disinvestment into places like Orange County that is not a SF or not a LA, or just seeing all the things that are literally an issue that's still happening everywhere. But I think like beyond it all, like the queer Viet community, they're not all like here. What I can appreciate is that we're all not like, we don't have to be like a certain level of like education or like a certain kind of like way of being or whatever. It really truly is um, someone just opening up and being curious about you and being like, hey, you want some food? Food is very big. And just being like curious about your story and not putting any judgment on it, and just wanting you to get to meet other people that you might be interested, not just because you're queer and Viet, but maybe you like Pokemon. And so I am very grateful for those who dragged me in. I'll call him out. And he is the gayest Viet auntie that you will ever meet. He is one of those who just has helped so many people out there and is just quiet about it. And so I wish there could be more VROCs. I welcome you to all the stuff that we're doing. But I think like queer community, queer Viet community can be anywhere and everywhere that folks really want it to be.
Also, shout out to James. I think if he's still on, um, from VROC,
Yeah.
right? For me, it's really funny. There were two ways for me to find other queer Viets. One is taking the aux cord from the DJ and plugging in like a remix of like No Funk Jang or something, and then just saying who's bopping to that, and I'm like, oh, my people. Um, the other way was actually through Pivot, the
Oh
Progressive
yeah.
Vietnamese American
Yes.
organization. I met Vin through there, and then Mama Kathy was on the board when I was on the board, right, from VROC. So it's all interconnected. And Pivot introduced me to a lot of queers who were queer Viets who were looking for a home, really, and a place to land. And like Ginny Ung in Houston, she's a Tofu Riot animator, beautiful stuff. And I think for a period of time, that was really the place for us to congregate and meet other like-minded people who would fight for the cause. Um, and it was beautiful. Um, Angela, I'm going to ask you to go first for this next one, since you've dropped so many bars. Um, what role do you think queer Vietnamese folks can play in broader movements for justice, whether it's LGBTQ or ANHPI, immigrant rights? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I do think that like a lot of what has shaped my work and like political identity is that we are on the margins of the margins, right? And so much of social change and liberation work comes from there because there is no comfort that is default. So you're like, we're just gonna go for it. And that's not there are a lot of caveats to that, and it's complex, and it's not a like an overarching narrative, but something that I think a lot about. I do think that specifically being Viet, we have a unique lens into anti-imperialism that we can connect to. We have a unique connection to overthrowing multiple colonizers and winning long-standing legacies of solidarity with other communities and also overcoming their oppressors that we can tap into. And I think we're being out organized on that front, like where people are denying us our ancestral sources of resiliency and strength. Um, uh, we also have a unique connection to abolition. So I think like if you're Viet, you should be an abolitionist, right? Because if you think about how the carceral state, so many of our family members experience, including my own father, right, who like came through re-education camps and through prisons, and that's also a complicated narrative. But for the most part, my grandmother's experience of it was like it was prison, and I hate prisons and I hate cops. That's why we don't talk to them. It's like that is an organizable in. We should use that with our people and our community about why prisons and jails are not it. So I think there's just like so many facets of our experience that we really can tap into. Um, I think there's sort of this like whitewashy or erasure of uniquely Southeast Asian contributions to APINH. Specifically, it's sort of like we're just recipients of other people's organizing histories. It's like, no, we have also paved the way. And just naming and shouting out specifically the Black and like recently people are like, oh, Asian and Black solidarity is new. It's like, no, it's not new. Viet folks have been building, like when you look at Veggie Farm, Bela, and like New Orleans. I also have people in like Louisiana. Freedom Inc., which literally was like M. Adams and Kajua, doing really critical also work at the intersection of Black and Asian solidarity and gendered violence, right? M. Adams, who now is like with Movement for Black Lives. There's a long history of Viet folks and Southeast Asian folks who were really like at the helm of works before many other Asian communities as well. And so, and almost anyone who's in that space is queer, and overwhelmingly femme and women identified. And so, yeah, just naming that. So yeah, I think like many of us are in real time through example challenging some of those narratives, like including myself. I'm often bringing that within the room. There's still Asian funders who are like, Southeast Asians are racist against us. I was like, because y'all give us no money. Y'all literally starve our communities of resources, and you're like you're pro cop, you're like doing all these things in our names that are against like our history and our culture and our legacies. So, there's a lot of learning to be done, and I try to bring that and be very loud about it in every room that I'm in.
Our role in a broader movement. I think like solidarity with other communities is so important, especially like, with the small business organizing that we do. Like, we, like Angela mentioned, like we're on the margins of the margins, right? And so it's so important that we do organize together to get results. And and it's interesting because like yes, like we might be small business owners, right? And there might be that tension there with oftentimes Latino workers, right? Um, and but it's like, how do we educate our community in that we need each other, because we aren't in the rooms where decisions are being made. And so at the end of the day, like we're just at the mercy of policymakers and elected officials, as the newly immigrated laborer that works for them, right? And so I think we have a lot of work to do in our community, and I think like recently, we were able to be successful because we were able to help these small businesses. There were Latino businesses and Vietnamese businesses. I think there was a Turkish one as well. But the landlord, how he manages is like a divide and conquer strategy, right? Like never meeting together, always just one-on-one meetings, right? And so for us, it's like, okay, we have to make sure like everyone is on the same page, right? Everyone is on the same page. How do we bridge this language barrier as well? Because not all of us speak Spanish, right? And so it's been quite the learning experience, but it's because we're um, we aren't in the majority. I think it's so important that we find the solidarity.
Yeah, definitely echo the solidarity like 1000%, right? I think that just being intersectional, I think is the first thing. And I guess I could come in with like a nonprofit kind of lens, and definitely we're super aware of the nonprofit industrial complex. Like we're like, okay, like let's not, can we not? But unfortunately, like if we are aware, some folks aren't, and so what we see a lot is like the way folks have structured, I think like even organizing, particularly from those like the nonprofit and not necessarily grassroots. Like it's very siloed off. Like you have to be like of one issue. And so what we see is that there's the API coalition, there's the Immigrant Rights Justice Coalition, there's the LGBTQ Commission. Like there's all these one issue kind of like entities of mobilizing, but we're not one entity people. Like being explicitly queer in Viet, we are always kind of in the middle of like pulling bridges and being like, hey, are you forgetting someone? You are. Or like, hey, there's you need to kind of respect the fact that there's a history or all of that. So I think like where we see ourselves, at least at VROC and where we're at in the field, is that we're just bridge builders. Like we're like, okay, we're like literally in between. We're the glue in between it. And I think that's really because, for queer Viets, we're like, it's just kind of natural that we see a structure oppressive and we're like, all right, let's be creative and navigate it, right? Let's kind of like work our magic. Let's put some razzle dazzle and somehow get it to our benefit, but also benefiting other folks, like our people. And so, I think in the broader way of for justice is really being able to dig a little deeper, right? Dig a little deeper into like what are the new, maybe not new, maybe it's just more decolonized tactics, right? What are the ways we can go about things that are different, right? And how can it be more inclusive? How can it be deeper, more radical, and deeper to actually getting to the core of what we want to fight and what future we want to build towards. So I think that the queer Viets really anchor their organizing in joy really well. And I think that's not always something that happens in organizing spaces where people are thinking about like, let's work towards a better world as opposed to let's fight against someone. But yeah, I think that's nonprofit world.
I feel that's so hard. Being at NQAPIA, so hard. All the different tables that we sit on, and it's like, oh, this is like when we're talking about immigration rights, oh, this is like a very AAPI issue. No, it's an AAPI and an LGBTQ issue. Any issue is all our issues. And we need to stop framing it as if it affects only one subset of the community. It affects the whole community, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, right? Um, and I think as queer Vietnamese folk, I have a friend who's queer Vietnamese and who hasn't come out yet. And they, see all this injustice and they'll text me and they'll complain like, I can't believe this is happening. And I'm just kind of like, I can't believe you lived through this whole experience and are choosing to do nothing about it, right? Um, like I'm not saying like you have to come out and I'm not going to out you, but like I can't believe that you watched your parents be displaced from a land and then with the, issue that's happening today, you will, and a lot of I think Vietnamese folks are like this, will behind closed doors say there's an issue, they don't like it, all this, but refuse to do anything about it. And I'm like, y'all, we have the power. Quit throwing it away. Like, you did not waste all of your power on getting to America. Period. You still have power. Let's utilize it, please. Because if you know it's wrong, it is wrong. And I don't care if you're Catholic or Buddhist, neither of those religions told you to turn a blind eye. So, um, to any queer Viet folks out there who are like, I, don't know how to be a part of the movement, or I don't know how to, be an activist. Babe, you do. It starts by you speaking up on when you see wrong in your own community. Um, whether that's for LGBTQ rights, whether that's for our rights as Asian Americans, or immigration, whatever topic floats your boat, or rocks your world, like, go do it, because no one else can from your perspective. Um, Anyways, thank you for the beautiful conversation today, y'all. I have two questions left, and I promise these are a little lighter, because in traditional Vietnamese, way, I want us to end with a light bang. Um, and if I had thought about it before, I would have been like, get a drink so we can yell together. Um, but IRL, we'll do it in IRL. So, Ben, why don't we start with you? What advice would you give to a younger queer Vietnamese person navigating this world today?
Yeah, I think like we definitely, being Vietnamese and queer, being American, right? Like I think we're more aware of how fortunate we are, but also how like how precious these rights we have are, and what it took to get to where we are today, right? And um, uh, for me, I think I mentioned it before, like aspiring to live authentically um, helped me find community, and that's it took time, right? I'm 35 this year. Um, I didn't grow up in a predominantly Vietnamese area either, and so um, it was, it's not a linear journey. It wasn't for me, but um, I'm very fortunate to be where I am today, and I have all our ancestors who have been struggling for me to be where I am today. So, yeah, live authentically. It's cheesy, right?
I can go next. I feel like I guess I do this in my job, but I have no idea what I say. And everything advice, take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, I think it's like it's okay to be both and, right? It's okay to have a like things are not nice now, but but you also deserve all the things in the world, right? And also have to have fun with it, right? Um, I think that a lot of times people look at marginalized community or people who's been disenfranchised as like lacking and just full of trauma. But I'm like, you're also full of wonder and like really great stuff. And yeah, you might be, but you're other things like I want to see what you nerd out about, right? And those are all very valuable and things about make you who you are. So I think that it's like trust the process and know that you have a home in community and we're here if you want to be here. But yeah, that's advice I would have. That's also cheesy too, like, oh, find out a TJ Maxx poster or something like that. But it's true. It's kind of like that journey of being able to reflect that all the things, good and bad, take you to where you're going to go. And there's always people who love you for exactly who you are, even if you don't know who you are.
I think about, my baby, not baby cousins who are young and queer, but not out. And I do think it's a different context. Like I do think also like there's also like disposition, but then also like social conditions that shape a person. I think that there's so much about the Viet experience, in part because we're so invisibilized and there's very little representation, even less if you're queer, Viet, and like, let's say left or left of center or progressive, when you like layer all of those, we're really taught to be small. And then I think also like the violence of day to day trying to survive, and like eggs are $12 now in New York, and like it's just really expensive. Just like in that grind, I do think that like that can get lost and feel like it's not important. And so I think yeah, like finding community, but even if it's not local, one also encourage folks to build what's local. And I do think that like Texas, even in some of like the most like remote, most like red places, like there's amazing community in Nacogdoches, there's amazing community in Houston. Like there's a lot of growth and gains that have been made, and people are doing this brave, heart forward, courageous work despite like the violence. So it's like find those spaces, tap into them. And if you can't find it locally, there are national spaces like NQAPIA and other spaces where you can like plug into. Um, so I think like for me, like my biggest quirk is like sometimes I think because queer culture is also pop culture, and a lot of that is credited to like specifically like Black queer women and trans folks. Like a lot of like the vernacular that's like TikTok language is actually right? Like African American like vernacular. So I think like for me like queerness, like I think some of my cousins and their friends are like, oh, being bi is cute. I was like, I would love if you were bi. I'm bi babe too. And for me, queerness is also a political identity. And so it's like, I don't believe in forcing someone's journey to be like out and closeted. And if you're like silent though, or like playing along with like all the harm that's happening, like in Texas, even as an ally, like I think like now is the time where I think for me that was like surfacing a little bit. It's like you don't have to come out, you don't have to be, but you shouldn't be silent when people are coming for trans folks and queer folks. And then like secretly identify as queer. So I don't know. I have feelings around that. You can cancel me. That's fine. But I was just thinking about like for me, like queerness is innately a political solidarity identity. It's not just like it is both and. So I think that's something that I think about is like to also deepen on those fronts as well, and to think of oneself as a political identity. I think there's a lot of pressure for Viet folks because there's so much trauma around politics to be apolitical. And I see that in my family a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think I tell people to like not be afraid, like go be hamjoy,
Yes.
be the friend, be the friend that like baidat,
Yeah.
right? And do stuff that brings you joy because I think, uh, you know, for us being Vietnamese, there's that kind of like that inherited trauma from our parents where like we shouldn't be having fun because they sacrificed so much for us to get here, and then being queer on top of that, like for some folks like myself before I came out was, oh, I'm such a disappointment to my parents because I'm not going to, you know, continue the bloodline or whatever, or be that stereotypical like alpha Vietnamese male drinking awful beer
Yeah.
and calling it a Friday night, life's too short for that. So like to all the young queer Vietnamese folk that are listening, don't be afraid to ham chơi. I mean, within reason, right? Don't go too far now, but don't be afraid to have a little fun and a little joy in your life, because you've earned it. Your has earned it, and that's enough. So, um, to close out, I have a two-parter question. What is your go-to Vietnamese karaoke song? And please plug your organization. So I'll go first so you guys can think on that. My go-to Vietnamese song would be Mặt trời của em by Phương Ly. And then because it's a happy song, most Vietnamese songs I know are like sad and depressing, like, oh, he was the love of my life and he married someone else. And I'm like, girl, please. Um, Not in this day and age. But for NQAPIA, I am happy to say that we are going to have our first drag brunch of the year in the Bay Area on May 17th. It will be an all Asian American Pacific Islander cast. So you can go to the link in our bio to sign up for that if you are in the Bay that weekend. And if not, support the cause. Because if you don't, no one else will.
I I'm nostalgic and a little old. I don't do much Viet karaoke because I never actually learned how to read Viet. And I was not raised in Viet church. But I do love, I know this is so nostalgic, but Lung Mea, which is like that classic sort of lullaby. It's like if I'm feeling bad and I just need some comfort, I will listen to that. It's like, oh, I'm back in like being rocked in a yum, you know? Um, and then, yeah, my org, I'm with Emergent Fund. We're a really unique movement, frontline, rapid response funder. We're one of the few who fund on an ongoing monthly basis for folks who are really, truly leading some of the most like high risk, quote unquote, never a risk to fund our own communities, but risky according to like traditional mainstream philanthropy. But people really made gains and are taking and absorbing a lot and risking life and limb in this moment for our democracy, for our human rights. Yeah, we fund. It's been wild. I will have to say, like, demand is at an all-time high, and has been for the past couple of years, and it's only ticked up. And um, I think the first year we had like 77 total for the year. This past month, this current month round, we have 116 proposals to review. So I think that gives me hope in that there's a lot that's moving in this moment in time, and it's intense to be funding movement work at this moment. So yeah, would love if y'all would consider, it doesn't have to be us, support some of our grantees, support us, that most of that money, we're a small team, it doesn't go to us, it goes to directly back into the field. Yeah, check us out, Emergent Fund. Yeah, and that's me. Also, if you're in New York, also Ben, we should link up. But
Definitely.
well, I think Viet, which I'm trying to revive, which is it's not meant to be queer, but is all queer. So I just want to say, so if you're in New York, we should connect.
Definitely. And I guess I'll go next. I don't know if I have a go-to karaoke song, but I love some Trần Công Sơn songs. Uh, I'm thinking of Nắng Thủy Tinh, or yeah, I still want to see the movie, but I don't know how to get access to it. There's like a
I'll hit you up later.
oh, okay, all right, connections. um, yeah, Viet Place Collective. Yeah, we've been around for 2 years. We're in the process of incorporating, and so I already tapped Frederick for his know-how there. Yeah, we organized, mobilized around a planning process that could potentially displace, such a crucial cultural space for us. Our mission, we want to uplift the Vietnamese legacy, and through these, and for us, it's through these small businesses, right? They're the ones carrying on um, uh, our through our food, through our culture, and so we've been able to convince the city to hire a Vietnamese outreach specialist. That's in the works, and so yeah, I'm really proud of the work we've done. We just partnered with OCA to do a screening for New Wave documentary recently in the parking lot of the Eden Center. Once again, this parking lot. Like one day we'll have like a proper community gathering space that's like off in the distance. But for now, we have this parking lot that's privately owned too, not by the community, unfortunately. But yeah, it's been a really rewarding 2 years. And you can follow us on social media. We have a very active social media presence. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to be in this space with you all.
All right. Oh, don't keep us for too long. Um, for karaoke, do not know any Viet songs. I think I'm terrified of saying any Viet wrong, but I got Viet American, so big fan of Our Lady Trish. And so I think that's a beautiful song. Uh, uh, and just about V-Rock. Yeah, we're here. V-Rock, follow our Instagram because honestly, I'm probably gonna forget a lot of stuff. But some of the things that we're really looking forward to do this year is so for 4 years now we've had a pride in Little Saigon that has our secret mutual aid because we can't get mutual aid because we're fiscally sponsored. But we give free haircuts, free food, free. There's a clothes swap, free makeup, free, just like literally anything free. Like because we love free, and it's one of the only prides that is accessible to low income folks. And for 4 years, it's been mostly low people of color come through because they love the freebies, but they stay for the community. And so we're doing that this year. It's in Little Saigon. Folks want to come through. It's on our Instagram. Just look at that. And then one of the things happening this year is that it's our gala year. What a weird time to be fundraising. So we're celebrating 12 years. We're a tween of Viet. And so gala is basically a Viet wedding gone wild. It's a drag show. It is the moms are singing. We do awards. And to give you an idea of like, it was 300 plus queer Viet people and loved ones, intergenerational, partying it up at like a wedding venue in Orange County. And it's so much. it's so much. I'm kind of scared of it, but it's like extremely fun and it's extremely heartwarming. And we're in the planning process. That will be in October. So if any of y'all are around Orange County, October 17th, that's the date that we haven't put out a save the date yet. Come join the party. There is some shots that are going to be there, and it is for us. So it's really, really great.
So I'm hearing bring the henny. That's what I'm hearing. That's right. That's right. We know how we roll. We know what it is.
We had last time, and then some guy, which is a
Nice.
gin. People are just like,
nice. Daniel Wynn started or was like one of the first organizers of Vela and Veggie Farms, and so like a lot of their politics like came into the Sonkai. So yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We love it. Y'all heard it here first, October 17th.
Yes.
Angela may or may not be in drag that night. Who knows? We'll see.
It would be fabulous if I could make it. Yeah, that would be great. Actually, one of my characters is Dwin inspired, so yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna hit you up later for those photos because we didn't get to really cover that today. But thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate being in community with you all. Glad we're all moving our margin forward. And if you'll allow me, I will do a radio outro. Từ mọi người ở NQAPIA, Trần Tĩnh xin cảm ơn tất cả mọi người đã theo dõi chương trình ngày hôm nay và xin hẹn gặp lại trong những chương trình tới.
Hey, nice.
That was
I
so
loved
good.
it. Thank you
So
so
good.
much, y'all.
So good.
So good. Y'all are so beautiful. Thank you so much for tonight's conversation. It was a blessing to be here. Bye, y'all.
All right, take care.
Have a good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye.